Hello everyone and welcome to this episode of Ignition Time. The whole battle over President Biden's infrastructure plan is heating up. There he is, President Biden. What's up, President Biden? And I can tell you that the president is meeting with Republicans and Democrats in order to try and gather support for the infrastructure package. One of the individuals who's been helping President Biden gather support for the infrastructure package is Pete Buttigieg, the Secretary of Transportation. Now, in some new comments, Pete Buttigieg actually walked back some of his earlier comments about the extent of the job creation from the infrastructure plan. I actually broke this news already, but this is the first time that someone from the administration has actually walked back comments about claims regarding the infrastructure plan. Here's a headline from Politico. Buttigieg walks back claim that infrastructure plan will create 19 million new jobs. The number should instead have been 2.7 million, and he acknowledged that. Now again, I did break this news on our channel last week, but what is interesting is that a member of the White House is essentially saying, hey, I should have been more clear, I should have been more specific. Now, we don't really know whether this was an honest mistake or whether this was an intentional misrepresentation, but to be completely honest with you, there were many members of the administration, not just Pete Buttigieg, but also the White House senior economic advisor, Brian Deese, and both of them actually said that this new plan would create 19 million new jobs. The fact is, without the infrastructure plan, the US economy was expected to add 16.3 million jobs, and with the infrastructure plan, the US economy is expected to add 19 million new jobs. That is an extra 2.7 million jobs. Now, keep in mind, this is just an expectation, if you will, from Moody's Analytics, so these numbers could themselves be way off. But it's interesting to see administration officials latch on to the fact that the infrastructure plan would create 19 million new jobs. Let's take a look at an interesting exchange. I would actually go so far as to call it a face-off between Fox News' Chris Wallace, who's a highly respected reporter, and the US Secretary of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg. And in this first segment, Chris Wallace actually points out to Pete Buttigieg that amongst the 10 largest countries in the world, the US ranks first in infrastructure. So why are we being told that, US infrastructure is so bad? And let's check out the response from Pete Buttigieg, which I thought, to be completely honest, was sidestepping the question. But let's take a look at this interesting exchange between Chris Wallace and Pete Buttigieg about the need for American infrastructure, and more importantly, about potential misrepresentation from members of the administration about how important this is. Let's roll the tape and check this out.
You all like to say that U.S. infrastructure is ranked 13th in the world, but our colleague Chuck Lane of the Washington Post did some interesting research. 3 of the nations ahead of us on that list are Singapore, Hong Kong, and the United Arab Emirates, which are tiny states and hardly comparable. Of the 10 largest countries geographically, including China and Russia, the U.S. actually ranks first. So, Secretary, not to say that everything's fine, but why not be straight about the actual conditions here in the U.S. to the American people?
Well, the American people already know that our infrastructure needs a lot of work. That's one of the reasons why there's such strong support for the president's American Jobs Plan. Look, the American Society of Civil Engineers rates our infrastructure. We've been getting a lot of C's and D's, but you don't need an engineering report to know that driving on American roads, they're not the way they should be, that our bridges need work. We've got thousands upon thousands that are in poor condition or even structurally deficient. If you go to U.S. airports and you compare them to airports in other countries, other developed countries, you know that the U.S. is not at a high standard. We don't have a lot of work to do to persuade the American people that U.S. infrastructure needs major improvement. The American people already know it, and that's one of the reasons why there's such extraordinary Republican and independent and Democratic support for this package among the American people.
Now, this segment is even more interesting. Chris Wallace calls out the exaggeration, if you want to use the phrase misrepresentation. That's your decision. But Chris Wallace calls out the exaggeration, and Pete Buttigieg essentially clarifies his statement and walks back his statement, saying he should have been more clear. Let's take a look at this segment about the exaggeration, if you will, that is called out by Chris Wallace, and the response from Pete Buttigieg, for the first time walking back some of his comments and saying, I should have been more clear. Let's roll the tape and check out this rather interesting exchange.
Not necessarily in Congress, however. I want to give you another fact check. All of you in the Biden administration have been selling this plan as a huge jobs creator. Here you are just last Sunday.
The American Jobs Plan is about a generational investment. It's going to create 19 million jobs. And we're talking about economic growth that's going to go on for years and years.
But it turns out the study you're citing from Moody's Analytics says the economy will add 16.3 million jobs without the infrastructure bill and 2.7 million more with it. So it doesn't, as you said last Sunday, create 19 million jobs. Again, Secretary Buttigieg, why mislead folks?
Well, you're right. I should have been more precise. The 19 million jobs that will be created are more than the jobs that will be created if we don't do the plan. And it's very important to make this point. As you just showed us,
2 million more,
Moody's is
not
saying that we will
million.
create 2.7 million. Yeah, exactly. It'll create 2.7 million more jobs than if we don't do it. And that's very important because there are people on this network and others saying with a straight face that this would somehow reduce the number of jobs. In fact, at least according to that Moody's analysis, 2.7 million additional jobs if we pass this package. Just further proof that it's good for the economy, and taken as a whole, it's going to add jobs compared to doing nothing.
But would you agree that you and the president and Brian Deese, the economic advisor on this program last week, you all exaggerated the jobs impact?
Look, there are a lot of different analyses about just how many million jobs this is going to create. I saw a Georgetown study. I think it said an investment of this type will create or save
Secretary,
10 to 15
you're the
million.
one who cited Moody's
jobs.
Analytics as 19 million, and it's actually 2.7 million, which is a bunch, but it's not what you said.
It's part of a scenario that Moody's says will create 19 million jobs. But the bottom line is it's going to add jobs. And this is a direct refutation of people who are saying otherwise. So, yeah, you're right. I should be very precise. The difference in jobs that particular analysis suggests is 2.7 million more. That is a great place to be. Why wouldn't we want America to create 2.7 million more jobs? And I want to say something else about the jobs that's very important. The majority of them, according to a lot of the studies we've seen, will be for people who don't necessarily have college degrees. So at a time when you got a lot of blue-collar communities that are hurting, a lot of questions about the future of union jobs, construction jobs, manufacturing jobs, these are exactly the kind of jobs we need to be creating. And it's part of why, again, the American Jobs Plan has such remarkable support among Republicans, independents, and Democrats across the country. Maybe not yet in the Republican establishment here in Washington, but around the country, this bill is already enormously popular.
Now, if you thought that was interesting, wait till you check out the next segment. Chris Coons, the United States Senator from Delaware, who is a Democrat, talked about infrastructure in the region of hundreds of billions of dollars when he was speaking with Punchbowl News. Folks, hundreds of billions of dollars is substantially different from $2.25 trillion. So what exactly is the benchmark? What exactly is the ballpark area where the administration wants to compromise? That is the big question. Also, Chris Wallace specifically asked Pete Buttigieg if the administration would have to go back to the drawing board in order to try and get some support from Republicans. And to be completely honest with you, I thought Pete Buttigieg's responses were kind of cookie cutter, basically saying, hey, everybody agrees it's needed. I don't think there was anything significant in the responses from Pete Buttigieg. But one of the reasons this exchange stands out is Pete Buttigieg essentially laid down a marker suggesting that they wanted the infrastructure plan to happen, the administration wanted the infrastructure plan to happen by Memorial Day, which is the 31st of May this year. And that's about 8 weeks away. So folks, the White House is pushing very hard to make something happen very quickly on a matter of such significant importance, and they can potentially do it through reconciliation. I'll be covering that in a little bit more detail in another video. Let's roll the tape and check out this very interesting exchange between Pete Buttigieg and Chris Wallace, where Pete Buttigieg says, we have an expectation of major progress in the infrastructure package by Memorial Day. Let's check this out.
Well, I think the president will have an open mind and be interested to hear other ideas on every dimension of the package. But as he said, doing nothing is not an option. And we also can't wait too long. So he's got an expectation of major progress in Congress by Memorial Day. But of course, a plan gets better when you take input on board from our party, from the other party, from both houses, and that's the process that's underway right now.
Well, let's talk about that, because you do have defections already from the Democratic side. Democratic Senator Joe Manchin says he's not willing to go to 28% tax increase. He wants to go to only 25%, which means you wouldn't raise nearly as much money. He also says he opposes the idea of reconciliation, jamming this through on a straight party line vote. And then there is Senator Chris Coons, who's very close, from Delaware, who's very close to Joe Biden. He said this week.
I do think that there is an opportunity here for us to come together around a smaller package. And by smaller, I mean hundreds of billions of dollars that is directly targeted at hard infrastructure.
So he's not talking about 2.25 trillion. He's talking about hundreds of billions. Don't you have to go back to the drawing board, Secretary?
Well, I certainly don't think we have to go back to the drawing board, given that the American people want this to happen. I mean, we got 2/3 of the American people, often Republicans, supporting the provisions in this plan. When you break them down, that tells us we're on the right track. Of course, there are different shapes this can take in terms of the legislative packages. Of course, there are different ideas about exactly how to target the programming or exactly how to fund it. That's the conversation that's underway right now. It's what a negotiation is. But there's certainly, I've got tons of respect for Senator Manchin, Senator Coons, others who are bringing forward ideas in the Senate. We got some fellow Democrats in the House who are saying this isn't big enough. You got to do more. We're going to find the right path, but I think what the president has laid out, and so far it's still the most specific proposal that we've seen here in Washington, is a really, really well thought out proposal, and that's why America wants it done. I mean, it's very rare to find any legislation that this high of a proportion of Republicans, Independents, and Democrats across the country believe we ought to pass. So that tells us we've got to be on the right track here.
Thank you so much for watching, everyone. My name is Dr. Nitin Chhoda with Ignition Time. I appreciate you. This right here is a little bit of information about me. You'll learn more about who I am, what my journey has been like, and why you should listen to me. Please subscribe. Please enable notifications. That would mean a lot to me. I would really appreciate that. That helps out the YouTube algorithm. Thank you so much for watching. I'm looking forward to seeing you in the next episode of Ignition Time. Take care. Bye.